Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to another week of live radio. Right here with me, your host, Kev Baker, on the Kev Baker Show, right here on Truth Frequency Radio, www.tfrlive.com. Remember, we're going out live on TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, right here on the home website as well. And if you could do me one big favour today, it would be that you can tell at least 3 people, only 3 people, about what we do here at TFR, where silence is consent. So I've had a busy weekend, as usual. Used to have the weekends off, but really enjoying the streaming now. And on yesterday's stream with Scott and Joe, towards the end of the show, I was talking about how there's a real weird synchronicity going on right now. Because somebody I've really come to love working with here on the show, and he's back with us today, is Charlie Robinson. Now, Charlie Robinson is the author of a book called The Octopus of Global Control. Now, when I first came across that book, I thought that's a pretty cool name. And Charlie himself will say it's not the first time that the octopus has been used to kind of describe this control structure. However, it's really kind of kicked off a synchronistic series of events for me. Now, I'll be the first to say this could probably and will probably mean nothing. However, we look for patterns. We look for these synchronicities. And ever since I first spoke to Charlie, it's this pesky octopus. It just turns up everywhere. Because I like the TV show Stranger Things, and we've done shows on that here and on Freaky Friday. And in season 2, in the Upside Down, you have this monster which you can only really describe as a multi-legged octopus-like creature. So that's one thing, okay, one data point. And then we had the show with Geordie Rose. Now, Geordie Rose is quite infamous for saying that AI, it's nothing like demons, like Elon Musk refers to, but he compares it to something akin to the H.P. Lovecraftian old ones. Well, when you start looking into H.P. Lovecraft, you find something called Cthulhu, a big, angry, octopus-looking sea monster. And of course, both Stranger Things and Geordie Rose, they talk about parallel realities, other dimensions. And then just recently, I was watching The OA, one of the strangest shows I've ever come across on Netflix, but one of the most interesting and thought-provoking as well. And then, boom, right in the middle of watching that, what shows up in there? The main character has communication with, you guessed it, a giant octopus. So we come full circle tonight because I'm joined again by my good friend, Charlie Robinson. His website is over at theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. And for anyone who hasn't heard of Charlie before, he's the author of the book, like I say. And this book is a controversial and hilarious book that features the opinions of over 500 experts that expose and explain the century-long plan for world domination by the global elite. He had a front-row seat to the fraud and corruption in the mortgage industry, which, during his 10-year career in Las Vegas real estate, and he credits John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, as the final piece of the puzzle that helped him to really see how the American government operates. Charlie's an entrepreneur with a marketing degree from the University of Southern California and agrees with one of my favorite comedians, Bill Hicks, that everyone in marketing should kill themselves. And he is fresh back from a trip to the belly of the beast. We're going to be finding out all about that. We'll be tying it all in with current events, a lot of comedy along the way as well. So without any further ado, Charlie, my good friend, welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me back.
What have you done to me, dude?
United Kingdom.
What have you done to me? What have you done to me with this octopus, man? It's turning up everywhere. And I get it. You know, it's like one of those things. Somebody buys a new car. You've never seen that car before in your life. But then you start seeing that same car everywhere. So I appreciate that the octopus, it's in my consciousness. Maybe I'm noticing it more now. However, you know how my tinfoil thinking works, Charlie. It's almost like there's some kind of programming going on right now. Our very own Chris and Cherie Geo here on the network, they talk about this kind of octopus-like entity as well with the tentacles and things. High weirdness, dude. Very weird.
For sure, and it's actually a perfect metaphor for these psychopathic masterminds, because this animal, this octopus, has some characteristics that are very unlike most other animals. I think a lot of people know how intelligent they are. They're very smart. You can give them problems like things trapped inside of mason jars, and they'll unscrew them and take them out and put them in certain things. They figure they've been known. I guess the studies show that if a octopus has gone through a cave in the past, within the last 3 years or so, it will remember what that cave looked like on the inside. So they set up mazes and things like that, and the octopus can find its way through. So it's very intelligent. Obviously, it's got the tentacles, which I used in the book to signify 8 different methods of control. But it has 3 hearts, although the octopus that runs our world, I think a case could be made that they have no heart at all. But a real octopus has 3 hearts, can change. We know about it changing colors. One of the things it can also do is it can change textures. So it can spray ink on you to get away. It can stay and fight with a really sharp beak that's hidden underneath its tentacles that most prey don't see coming until it's too late. So it's just kind of just the perfect animal to symbolize the psychopathic rulers that are intelligent and deceptive and hidden in the shadows, but can be vicious if they need to be, or they can run and fight again another day if that's the best course of action. So it's perfect. And of course, like you said, I didn't come up with this. It wasn't me. It came from a quote from 1922 from John Francis Hylan, who was the mayor of New York City at the time, talking about a great octopus with its sprawling tentacles that had taken over the city. And he said, to be more specific, he was talking about the Rockefeller Standard Oil interests. He was talking about how they had infiltrated the court systems and the media and in the scientific community and the jobs market and things like that. And he was talking about how they were in control. And it was interesting to read that quote, because you would assume, if you didn't know it was from 1922, you would assume it was just somebody talking about the current state of things. So what it really proved was that 100 years had gone by and nothing has changed. They're still in control. The octopus is still in the shadows, and it's not the politicians that we love to hate. They're just, puppets, as we say, but they're not the octopus. There's so many layers above them.
They're merely like one of the little suckers upon one of the tentacles.
Yeah.
They're just quite insignificant. They're quite a low part down this power structure when you actually get behind it. And I missed out one kind of synchronicity there, and that's a audiobook series I'm listening to as well, Charlie. And the latest one is called Children of Ruin. It's about going out and terraforming planets, and they've got a CRISPR kit, and they've got the gene that can speed up it's like cognitive development. So you can basically speed up and accelerate evolution. You get sentient beasties, shall we say, because in this second installment, what they do is that they give it to the octopus, and the octopus gains this level of intelligence. And I'm not going to spoil the book for anyone because it's absolutely fascinating. But it's just weird, all of these tentacles that I'm seeing here, there, and everywhere. And one place that is definitely very close to the heart, the brain of the octopus, has to be the city of London. And you're just back from there. So I want to hear Charlie's take on what you made of that place. I remember going down in 2013, loved it. Absolutely beautiful city, some parts of it. But there's a feeling there, and especially when I was in and around Buckingham Palace, it's almost like an oppressive feeling comes upon you. But what do you make of it, dude?
Well, it's been 30 years since I had been in London last. So I was there in 1989. Interesting. I was there for a week in 89. And during that time, just out and about, I saw the Queen, I saw Prince Charles, and I saw Diana.
Wow.
All of them. Just so we came around a corner and there was a big crowd, and I was wondering what that was. And I climbed up on a lamp pole and looked over, and limo pulled up, doors opened up, Charles and Diana get out, waved to everyone, and walk into a movie premiere.
There's people in London lived there all their lives and haven't
never seen them.
Yeah, exactly, man. That's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. I literally came around the corner, climbed up. What's going on here? Oh, wow, look at that. They walked in. It was I don't remember which James Bond movie it was, but it was the one that came out in 1989, and there was the London premiere. So we saw that, saw the Queen out and around, doing her thing. And this time around, we didn't see that. But I forgot how much I enjoy the city. There's just a lot going on. It has the things about New York that people like without the horn honking and the middle finger and the trash and everything. It's a very well kept up city. It is Morrissey said in his song, talking about London, saying you're all repressed, but you're wonderfully dressed, and that was kind of what I was thinking when I was there. I forgot how much money is centralized there. And I grew up in Southern California. I lived in Newport Beach. Newport Beach has a ton of money, like insane amounts of wealth, but I've never seen the sort of car show that I saw in just a couple of days being in London. I mean, I'm talking about McLarens all over the place, Lamborghinis everywhere, Bentleys, Rolls Royces, Aston Martins. It just seemed like they were giving them out. They were so ubiquitous. I mean, it was I kind of got focused on that after a while, like, holy man, I got to see what's next. I mean, what am I going to see? Bugattis, sub Bugattis. I mean, it was nuts. But my overall take when you go into, so as you know, there's London itself, and then there's the city of London, and that is not to be confused with London. So it is its own little city state, like the Vatican and Washington, D.C. And if you know what goes on in the Vatican and you know who's running Washington, D.C., then what you can assume is that the same level of like lawlessness and criminality is probably happening in the city.
Could we almost tie them in then, or compare them, for the sake of tonight's first segment anyway? You said, I believe you said, that the octopus has got 3 hearts. There you go. There's your 3 city-states. And this really controls it.
With different purposes. I would say the Vatican is the spiritual component, Washington, D.C. is the military component, and the city of London is the banking component of it. I think that's fair to say. Yeah. And so as you go into the city of London, which is small, I don't know geographically how big it is, but I'm going to say maybe 1 or 2 square miles, not the biggest place. But one of the symbols that you will see literally everywhere there are dragons. Dragons are guarding the entrance to the city. They're all over the place. They're all over London in general. So, I mean, those of us that sort of jokingly talk about the reptilian queen and everything, I mean, we're really not too far off. I took a tour of the Tower of London, which is used to be the castles where King George lived and ruled back in the 1100s. And I, it's interesting. We did all the touristy type things, but I decided that I was going to just start taking pictures of anything reptilian related that I found in this castle. And it was everywhere. I mean, it was on the tops of these helmets that they'd had, the suits of armor that they would use for jousting had like a lizard on the top. And I mean, just very unnatural places that you would put a lizard or a dragon. They seem to be obsessed with it there with regard to and of course, you and I know, and probably most of the listeners know, that there's a ton of symbolism, and like a lot of cultures speak through symbols more so than they do words. So you would see these sort of overriding themes, which was dragons, lizards, and just an obsession with jewels and things like that. So yeah, it's all that being said, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I really forgot how much I liked London. And I think coming back, instead of being 16 and being 46 to see it, was great. And I only spent a couple days there, but
it's quite interesting because, I mean, that was my first time really spending any time in London. Usually when I was in the army, at best I'd be off one train at King's Cross and then on to another one. It's barely seen the place. But the one thing that really jumped out at me to start with, like you're saying, this is symbology, and it was the gargoyles and things that I started seeing first, and I'm thinking, what the hell is going on here? And it's hidden in plain sight. This is something we hear about a lot as well, and when you do go to London, if you just take the time to pay attention to what is around you, then it starts to make sense when you hear people like me and Charlie, tongue-in-cheek, calling it the Reptilian Queen, the Reptilian Palace, because they're steeped in this stuff. And not only that, they're proud to show it off, Charlie.
Yeah, for sure. Like we can, like we joke about the shape shifting and all that stuff, and maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but there's no doubt that it is important to them on some level that they have made these animals their mascots, so to speak. They play a huge role. Gargoyles, I mean, even on just like the Museum of Art, the Natural History Museum, just every single space along the edge of the roof line are a different type of gargoyle, and so some people will say, well, that's just the architecture back then. Maybe it is, but you could have had dogs and cats and birds as that. But why did you pick such demonic and utterly horrifying symbols to put up around and surround these beautiful, museums and libraries and places and castles?
And the architecture is, the buildings, I'm a bit of a geek that way. Sounds a bit boring, but I love architecture, and the buildings there they're majestic, they truly are. And like you say,
for sure,
that they finish them off with all this creepy reptilian stuff. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, it is. And so we did that. We did the double-decker bus tour when you get up on the top and you drive around. And I was kind of half paying attention. I had been on a flight all night long, so I was a bit tired. But I snapped out of it. I could tell. I couldn't hear what they were saying. There was somebody that was on the microphone sort of directing the whole thing, but I didn't put the headphones in and listen to it. I was just looking around. But I could tell when we got in the city of London, because right as you go in, there's a gigantic dragon. And I recognized that, and I started looking around saying, okay, well, let's see what we've got here. But so in the symbolism of like, if you remember, like back in the 80s, that video game, Dragon's Lair.
Oh yeah.
I was obsessed with that game. But at the very end of the game, the dragon is guarding all of the gold. And I was thinking about that as we're going into the city of London, thinking, well, they've got dragons everywhere because they're surrounding and symbolically guarding all the gold. And I think that there's a documentary called The Spider's Web. It is about the banking system of the city of London and its tentacles, well, to use that term, of the islands that they run British banking out of, Bermuda, Jersey, Cayman Islands, and places like that. And I think that what has happened, I think that in the 50s, the overt outward physical control of the British Empire disappeared, but sort of took on a new version, and that was the covert control through the banking system. I think it sort of left its I
almost look at it like the British Empire. They used to be proud of the fact that people could see the Union Jack everywhere. They were in your face, but then they obviously at some point switched, like you say, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, brother, to this kind of stealth mode where, they have this illusion that they don't really have much power down there in London. It's all ceremonial, blah, blah, blah. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, the slavery works much better when the slaves don't know that they're slaves. If you're living in India and you see the Union Jack there and you see the British military there, you understand that you're under British control. Yep. But once that disappears and you get the illusion that you have your own freedom, but what you really have is a covert control through the banking system, through the central banks, and that runs through the city of London, which is, of course, part of the reason why you're seeing Bugattis and McLarens all over the place, because that's where the money is, right? So there's sick money there, and because we all know the banks have the money and the banks make the rules, right?
And a lot of that money, Charlie, or a big percentage of it, despite this mainstream media tactic of blaming everything on Russia, be it your country or my country over here, these oligarchs, after the breakup with the Soviet Union, a lot of Russian money coming over here. And in fact, you got a little taste of that firsthand, right?
Yeah, went into Harrods, the legendary department store, almost immediately as we walked in. Walked through the first section. There's a Louis Vuitton section there with purses, and we saw these two like juiced up Russian mafia guys, tattoos, affliction shirts on, real kind of goombot out, and they're buying purses, but they're sitting there just counting out just a huge brick of money. Just going through. We're like, wow, you don't see that every day. I mean, I don't even know how much it must have been 30 grand of cash just sitting there.
Most of the big kind of properties worth about 10 million pounds and things. That's your Russians. They're in there, You've got a Russian owns one of the biggest football teams in London. Yeah. Chelsea with Roman Abramovich. The place in the centre, anyway, I dare say when you go out to the suburbs and all the postcodes, that money doesn't filter down quite as well right enough because they're the ordinary people, just like us. But what did your family think of it? Because me and you, we come from this kind of mindset. We know roughly how the world works, what's going on. What did your family make of it, dude?
Well, when we went to the Tower of London and they were explaining I can't remember, it was King George or King Edward or one of those kings, who had 6 wives, and our guide was explaining how they learn in school, and my 7-year-old daughter learned it, which was when describing the 6 wives, you say divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. That's how you know what happened to his 6 wives. Wow. And she turns to me and she goes, they sure do love beheadings here, don't they? And they showed us the chopping block. Well, this is where the queen was taken. They chopped her head off here. And we're like, God, I mean, it was pretty dark.
It's barbaric, man.
It's barbaric. Yeah. I didn't obviously chime in with my reptilian dragon stuff. I didn't want to have my family turn against me, but you don't even really have to bring that up. You just go through these castles and you sort of get the history of it all. You see how it works, and they talk about, oh, well, this is where, this king came over and took over and burned down this whole area and then rebuilt his castle as a show of I've got power, and then he conquered this and you're just, my daughter's looking at me going like, what does that mean? It's like, it means that they came over and killed everybody and took all their stuff. And they have all this treasure and all these jewels because when you go invade another country and murder all their people, then you take all their stuff. You have to sort of explain like the dark side of history, Exactly. And then, of course, you have to think, well, how much of this is even the truth? Because, as they say, history is written by the victors, right? So you've got that, which adds, of course, tons of potential lies to it. And then you've got the fact that the royal family was in control of the information, and God knows nobody's trusting them with anything. You've even got
a King James version of the Bible that most Christians adhere to. I know, dude. Right. It's crazy.
Yeah, beheadings were, what we came away with was that beheadings were sort of normal, and like, you better keep your act together or watch your head. You might lose it. It was almost happens.
Like the kind of a regular day out back in the day, who's getting their head lopped off today then? And did you see any of the kind of police state activity going on around you?
Well, I did, actually. Well, for one, Trump was there when I was there.
Nice. Did you get Air Force One over? Is there something you haven't told me, Charlie? I mean, were you going over with Air Force One or something?
I did not go with Air Force One, but if I had, I'm sure I would have had a Big Mac or something on Air Force One, knowing him. It's they closed the roads down and everything. He made everything a bit complicated, but I did sort of impromptu. We all did impromptu sort of surveys with everybody, every taxi driver we got in with. What do you think of Trump? And it was pretty split, actually. I gotta be honest. There were a couple of the younger cab drivers were like, oh, we love him. We think he's great. He says what needs to be said. And then we have other people that were older, and they thought, well, we don't really care for him. We think he's kind of disrespectful. And I tried to, I offered them to keep, they could keep Trump if they wanted, but I let them know that we weren't going to be taking Piers Morgan back.
Oh, definitely not. We had a petition so that you guys could actually keep him over there when CNN were getting rid of him. He's a strange dude. He plays both sides of the aisle. He really does. But I agree with you.
Badly.
As somebody that lives here, I would agree that it is split really down the middle. And I find it interesting, the demographics you pointed out there, because younger ones will mainly get their news from the internet, and the older generation will be programmed by the mainstream media. And they've displayed the programming by the mainstream media, you know, Trump disrespectful, bad man orange, all this kind of stuff. So that's quite interesting. But yeah, he is a very polarizing character. We're going to come back on the other side, catch up more with Charlie about his trip. Charlie Robinson, the man behind the book called The Octopus of Global Control. He's here with us live on the Kev Baker Show. He's just fresh back from a trip to this crazy little island that I call home. We were catching up with him in the first part of the show about how he felt about London, what he's seen there, and that feeling that it gives you when you're surrounded by reptilian symbology and stories of a royal family that like to do nothing more than remove people's heads from their shoulders. But before we get back into it, please, I urge you all, check out his website, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. Check out the book as well. And Charlie describes this as the perfect thing you need if you're going to be armed with facts and little sound bites for across the dinner table. You know, this really backs up a lot of the stuff that we claim, we speculate about. Not only backs it up, but it actually proves a lot of it in the words of the people behind this plan to form a new world order, global government. Call it what you will. Now, in recent times, the UK, this really is Big Brother land over here. Orwell got it absolutely correct. And the CCTV, the Big Brother surveillance state, it's never so in your face as you get over here. And London, even from somebody who worked in security and CCTV, it's off the charts. And I know, Charlie, you've been looking into this side of things, and it actually shocked you as well, right? And you were sharing with me that it's not as bad as that in the US yet.
No, we actually left London after a couple of days and went out to the countryside to Hampshire, to a city called Hook, and stayed there for a night. And what I didn't realize at the time, but found out afterwards, was that Hook is the home of the most dangerous company in the world, Serco. And Serco runs a lot of the CCTV cameras throughout the world, not just in London itself, but everywhere. But while I was in the city of London, or London in general, you can't help but notice the surveillance state. I mean, it's beyond anything I've ever seen. And I've been looking for this. I've been aware of the surveillance aspects of our current society for quite some time now. And I'm not trying to say that it's necessarily all a bad thing. If I owned a jewelry store and I was worried about people breaking in, I would put cameras inside my store, and maybe one on the outside in the front, maybe one on the outside in the back. So I can understand sort of the practical reasons for it. And I'm not trying to say that having just cameras in general is necessarily a bad thing. But the statistics for the closed circuit TV usage in England in general, in London in particular, is astronomical. There are, according to the numbers that I found, 5 million CCTV cameras in Britain alone. 5 million. That's insanity. That goes way beyond just putting a couple cameras up to look out for your store. I mean, it's much deeper than that. There's 500,000 just in London itself. And in the tube stations, the London Underground, there's 15,516 cameras in there. So, you know, they've got an eye on everything, which makes you wonder about the 7/7 bombing. You know, if there's that many cameras, why do we only get one angle of it? But that's beside the point. But the stats show that for the average person in London, they are captured 300 times a day by different cameras from going from their home to their office, running some errands and back. So that's a lot. You would think, I mean, that of course makes people start to think of Philip K. Dick's book, Minority Report, and the movie, The Minority Report, that came out, that goes into sort of, you know, what a surveillance state means. It means that your every move is on camera. Anything that you've done is documented and can be used brought up later, at a later date. Now they say that the footage that they take with these CC cameras is dumped every 14 days or so off their servers. I have no reason to believe that that's the truth. I would, in fact, bet my life that they keep it much longer than that, maybe even indefinitely. In the United States, the NSA has built this Bluffdale, Utah storage facility. And they talk about the collection, data collection capabilities of that is enough to categorize and collect and retain every phone call, email, CCTV camera footage for around the country for the next 100 years. So so as far as them saying that they're going to dump footage off of a server to make room for it, don't hold your breath on that one. I would think that was a lie.
I'm sitting here laughing as well. As somebody that's worked in CCTV, without getting into trouble with any of my old companies or anything like that, I wouldn't really put too much attention on that time span that images are kept for, okay? Because, let's just say that that's a rough kind of figure. And if you come up here to Glasgow, which is like the pilot for the UK smart cities, not only are we being captured on all of these devices, all these cameras, from multiple angles, everywhere you walk, there's at least 2 or 3 on you nowadays. And it's going to a central hub here in Glasgow. Obviously, it's fed back into the police, but then it makes its way over to nice security over in Israel as well. So you've got this Israeli angle. Now, that's nothing against the country of Israel, okay? But you've got this Israeli kind of angle where they're keeping all of our data as well. And you do have to wonder, where's that going? What's it being used for? And what's the bigger plan here? Because this is really, really, as opposed to plateauing out and reaching a level, Charlie, it just seems to be increasing all the time.
Well, I think you had a young man on your show a couple of weeks ago, Mr. David Icke, that could explain the future of that or where it's going, as he mentioned a couple times to you in his new book that'll be coming out in September. I'm sure you guys are going to get into it again.
He's coming back on. Yes, he's coming back, Charlie. Can you believe it, man?
How nice is it to say that you've had David Icke on your show?
Oh, dude.
That was pretty cool. I was very happy for you. But that's a testament to your hard work, that you've been doing this for a long time now with integrity and purpose. And I think that's part of the reason why you were able to get David on. So congratulations to you. I've told you that privately, but I want to make sure I say it publicly.
Thank you, brother. No, it means a lot. And what was even more special was the fact that we actually got on, like we've been talking for years on and off air. Yeah. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that's going to be the start of David coming on a more regular basis. And you love David, and so many of us, whether we even appreciate it or not. There's so many hosts and networks out there, myself included, who will tell you stuff. And we've got it from reading David Icke or watching David Icke, and probably isn't given as much credit as the guy is due.
No, and that's part of the reason why I feel so comfortable talking to him, because in our heads, we've been talking to him for years, right? Yeah. But it's been a one-sided conversation. It's just we've been listening to him talk for years and years and years. So like when you met him, when I met him, we start chatting with him like we're old friends, but that must be sort of a sort of odd feeling to be somebody in the public eye and have people come up to you that you don't know, but who know you, or they think they know you, they know your work, and have them start chatting with you. But he's such a gracious,
I think it's
such a gracious guy.
It's quite funny as well, because I think it was your mum, or your wife said it's almost like us two are connected somehow anyway. And you have your meeting with David Icke only weeks before I have mine. It's weird, dude.
Yeah, well, you're probably due to have Graham Hancock on your show pretty soon, because I was chatting with him a couple of weeks ago.
That's weird. I'll tell you off there. But I am trying, shall we say? I am trying to, because I love him as well. But the CCTV, so what's it like where you are then?
Well, so I'll tell you what it's not like. The numbers show that there's 750,000 CCTV cameras in the UK, just in schools, hospitals, and care homes. That's insane. Mm-hmm. I think the sort of the pessimist in us, the side of us that understands the darkness, might be saying that they've got those cameras in the schools for because they're shopping, maybe, shopping for kids.
Shopping for kids and making it almost they're indoctrinating them. It's a normalization process, definitely. I remember when the first cameras went up over here, and they used to have to put them in cages because people would be trying to take them out with bricks and all sorts. And now you barely even notice them. It's like the boiling frogs. You never seen it all building up around you, dude.
Yeah, in the old Pink Floyd video from The Wall, the happiest days of our lives, we don't need no education. If you watch that video in the classrooms where they've got all the kids on the conveyor belts dropping them into the vat where they're churning out that meat sausage of just kids, and I think about the CCTV cameras in schools and everything, and I think that it's the boiling frogs effect. It's just the normalization, getting kids used to the fact that, oh well, yeah, of course there's cameras here. They're there to protect us. They're there, and so in the United States, we don't have that necessarily in schools yet. I think they might have that, in the outskirts of schools or maybe in some hallways or anything, but to have them inside the actual classrooms, I don't think that that's a thing yet. I might be wrong, but I don't think that is, but regardless, it's coming. Because what we see in China with the social credit system, what we see in the UK with the mass surveillance system, it's not that it's going to stay there. We all understand it's going to spread. Yeah. It's a test market. It's a debugging platform for them to figure out what works best. Hey, we put these CCTV cameras up and people start throwing bricks at them. We put them in cages. Well, what if we put up 1 million of them? Well, then there's probably too many for people to throw bricks at, right?
And make them smaller and make them just more covert instead of overt. Right. Absolutely agree.
Or you take a guy who you arrest for climbing up a pole with a baseball bat, breaking one of those things. You take him, arrest him, and put him in prison for 10 years and send the message to anybody: if you try this, we're going to come down on you hard. So it's the Orwellian, authoritarian type of response to stuff like this. I mean, it's crazy that we talk about 1984 and George Orwell all the time, but like here we go. Like this is something that he talked about. The constant surveillance, the constant cameras everywhere.
I think that shows. I mean, like your book demonstrates, this is nothing new. It's been an age-old plan, and there's people say that Orwell, he was definitely privy to this agenda. And back to Ike again, if you know the outcome, you can see the journey, right? So Orwell was told exactly where we're headed. He didn't have it spot on because the language, some of the language didn't exist back then. So, yeah, definitely not prophetic. It was a warning of what's to come.
Yeah, it's just taking it an understanding of what we're seeing currently, what the end game is, and then figuring out the logical progression from point A to point Z, right? This is how it would happen. It's how it would have to happen, right? You would normalize people. You would, and of course, hey, the idea of like video cameras, and look, we're communicating through a video camera right now. Exactly. They can't all be bad, right? Yep. So you sort of get this technology, and you have to understand that even though you get a benefit from it, it can always be used against you. Obviously, someone can turn on your webcam remotely. We know about that through Snowden. And we know about that through Zuckerberg putting tape on his camera. And we know about that just from logic that of course this stuff is going to happen. So where is it going to go from here? I mean, right now the numbers say that there's a closed circuit video camera for every 11 people in the UK. Well, that number is obviously dropping. It'll be 1 for 1, maybe even multiples for 1 as technology gets better, as prices come down, as the size of the cameras shrink. I mean, just talking about CCTV cameras is one thing. We're not even talking about webcams and the cameras in our phones and things like that. I mean, we have voluntarily walked into a surveillance state. We have voluntarily put our information about our personal lives on Facebook.
Yeah, I've heard people saying, well, it would be a step too far to put cameras in the home. Too late. We've already done that ourselves. The webcam, B, our smart devices. Most smart TVs now, they come with an installed camera, whether you're aware of it or whether they admit it or not. That's a reality.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we know about the Amazon Echoes and the Alexa and things like that. But I mean, Google got busted, and we talked about this on your show, but they got busted for having microphones in their Nest thermostats and not disclosing that. And they say, oh, well, it was an oversight. No, No, it was not an oversight. That's a lie. It was put there intentionally. They're harvesting as much information as they can get from you. And if they can get away with it, they will. And as we see this blending of, or this corporatocracy where corporations and the governments work hand in hand, there's no reason to think that it's going to get better anytime soon. In fact, it's only going to get ramped up. And then we talk about antitrust for companies like Google and everything. Please, that's not happening. Even if you did break up Google, you'd do what happened to Standard Oil. You'd break them up into a dozen different parts, and then those dozen different parts would just be as powerful. They'd just be doing their own thing, and they would just continue what they're doing, funneling money back to the parent company, and then later get put back together like they did with the telephone companies, like they did with the gas stations when they did that.
And when you listen to Zuckerberg, he's the one that's almost begging for regulation, because
which is why you should be very cautious of government regulation. James Corbett did a great show on this talking
That's
about
where
that.
I got it from as well, dude.
Yeah. Be very careful. He talked about please don't throw me in the briar bush. This is a problem. And you see Chris Hughes, who was the co-founder as well, he was coming out and talking about it, but I actually sort of believed him a little bit more because he's not a fan of Zuckerberg. He talked about breaking it up, but when Zuckerberg is saying, oh, create government regulations for us, I welcome that. That'd be good. Well, what it does, as you saw on that video as well, is that by creating government regulations, it's not so much that it regulates the company, but it puts out of business all the competitors, so that it creates a permanent place for a company like Facebook. They don't have to worry about somebody rising up. When he's saying, yeah, let's have massive government intervention in this to clean up everything. Well, then what would happen is that the barriers to entry for new companies would be so astronomical that they would never even bother going into that business, because it would require massive costs to get regulated by the government, and those fees would be so high that it would make it unfeasible to even go down that path. So
it's like it's like Article 13 here, Charlie. This copyright directive out of the EU. Right. All of the individual nation states, they need to make their own copyright law to adhere to Article 13. And this is where this can come into play again, because all it takes is the upload filters that platforms like YouTube, for example, a video sharing site, will need to buy and employ to make sure no copyrighted stuff sneaks through. Well, the biggest retailer of content filters happens to be Google. And they'll just put the price of that software, that tool, through the roof, to the point where the only people that will have it is the Google subsidiary of YouTube. And that means YouTube will be the only game in town.
You got it. And I got a taste of that when I came there. Every time I went someplace on my phone, I tried to open up a website or something on Facebook that had a link to an article. Whenever that article came up, it was asking me to agree to their terms of service and all these different things, and I just was like, whoa, this is unusual. This is Huffington Post. I might go to Huffington Post back home and there's no problem. Well, every article that I went to had that new thing. You have to click here to accept this and that, and so I knew what it was, but it still kind of caught me off guard a little bit. But
and somebody in the chat room there was saying, they've never had a Facebook account and it's BAM. And it wasn't that long ago I was reading about the fact that even if you haven't got a Facebook account, there's a high percentage of a chance that they're going to have a profile on you, because they're sharing data with all of these other tech companies. You may have been tagged inadvertently when the facial recognition was being trained by all of us when we thought it was cool. It would start recognizing us in pictures and we could agree if it was us or tell the actual thing if it was wrong. So that's the unfortunate thing. And BAM's aware of that. I'm glad BAM's aware of that, because a lot of people don't appreciate that, Charlie. That's how nefarious this is. You can be as tech savvy, social media savvy, and stay away from it, but they've still got their tentacles on you, man.
They do. And it's, it's once again, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, the idea of social media is cool because you can communicate with friends you haven't seen for a long time.
I would never have met
plan
you.
Things.
Yeah.
Or friends you've never met in person, for sure. You can have these connections. It's as superficial as they might be, and derive a lot of pleasure from that. Or business-wise, derive profits or interactions with people you might never have met. And these are great things, but it comes at a price. And people have said it before: if they're not selling a product, then you're the product. And I think we understand that our data is valuable. And so it's not surprising to me to see that sort of fall off turn to the dark side a little bit. And we know that that's happening at Facebook, because what you see are all of the co-founders of WhatsApp, John Coombe and the other guy leaving the company. You see the Instagram guys, Kevin Stystrom, leaving as well, and having big fights with Mark Zuckerberg on the way out over how he's taking their technology that they sold to him and doing something with it that he said he wasn't going to do. And we recently saw a push by the shareholders at Facebook to try and oust Zuckerberg, which went nowhere because he's got Class B stock, which gives him 10-to-1 voting rights on every share. And so he has himself over 60% of the voting rights, so it's impossible to vote him out. And that was not done on accident. Of course, that was done by design. And why would you do that? Why would you create this system of stock shares with a Class A and a Class B, which gave disproportionate voting rights to the executives? Well, you would do that if you wanted to stay in power. So I look at Facebook and the corporate structure of it and think it's really no different from going to the Tower of London and how the hierarchy was set up there, with kings trying to stay in power, and if anyone challenged them, they cut their heads off.
It's okay, because Mark's got his escape chute from the
right,
boardroom.
Right.
You can make this stuff
why
up.
would you put an escape chute in if you didn't think you needed it? And if you think you need an escape chute to get out of a board of directors meeting, what exactly are you doing?
That makes me think of George Bush, and I don't know how true this is, but he was allegedly quoted as saying, if they ever find out what we've done, we'll be lynched in the street. You know, that's what it makes me think of.
I put that in the book. Yeah, that was well documented, that if they ever found out what they do, we'd be hanged.
Now, before we go to the break, Charlie, have you got any more stats there on Big Brother Britain? Because I know you had a kind of list of stats.
Well, first of all, just from the course of 2007 to 2010, they spent £300 million installing CCTV cameras. That's just over a 4-year period. Think about how it's gone from there. So there is a huge push, financially backed, to make sure that these cameras have their way in there. And also 95% of the murders that are investigated by Scotland Yard, you rely on the CCTV footage for their cases. So, and I think that some people would say, oh, that's a good thing. We can solve murders. That stat is sort of leaked out there as like, hey, look at the positive aspects of this surveillance. Like, we're going to solve murders.
Thousands of hours that catches absolutely no crimes, but people's identities and everything else is still captured, It's almost like you're guilty until you're proven innocent.
That's exactly right. That is, you are in this system, you are set up to appear to be a criminal, just going about your daily business. And then it goes back to that whole philosophy of, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you have nothing to worry about. If that is maybe the most ignorant statement I've heard in quite some time, but you hear that all the time as a way of defending this. There's nothing. It's not going to end well. No. We know this. We see. You don't need George Orwell to tell you how it's going to turn out. I mean, we see how it's going to turn out. I mean, that's not even to go into the fact that they have the software to make it look like somebody has said something that they haven't said. I forget what it's called, but it's the software that
you've got deep fake, and you've got the kind of deep fake voices as well. But going back to the social media. Some people hate it, some people love it, but I like to kind of give a parallel that you can look in maybe TV shows, things like that. And Black Mirror, it tackles a lot of the topics that we speak about here. And episode 2 of season 5, which has just been released, it goes into the social media aspect of things, and it is absolutely brilliant. I urge anyone out there, even if you haven't seen Black Mirror, it's a really good take, and it really gets across the point of what this social media is all about, and just how detailed they go into your life, even compared to what the police know and things like that. So I urge anyone to check that out, Charlie.
That's the best show on television right now, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And for people that don't, it's on Netflix. For people that are unfamiliar with it, it's a series, but you don't have to. It's not a sequential series. It's
exactly.
Every episode is its own independent little show, about an hour long or so.
That's what I like
and it
about
deals
it.
With.
You can just
that's
randomly
what I like about
pick one. Yeah, you can just jump in, jump out,
jump in anywhere. Yeah, and it talks about the role of technology, and it's always set maybe 15 years or so in the future, and the role of technology and how it's used in a sort of unusual way, or a way that you're not really anticipating. Really well done, well written.
Absolutely. So let people know where they can find you on social media, the website, the book, and everything else, Charlie.
You can find me on Facebook as I'm blasting Facebook
hypocritically. That we are.
Hypocritically talking about my Facebook page. Yes, I say use their technology against them. I make no apologies for being on Facebook as I'm blasting Facebook, because I am simply using their technology to broaden my reach, to meet interesting and cool people. / the Octopus of Global Control. Go in there, check it out. I've got videos. I've got funny pictures. You can send me messages. I always respond to people. I get
one of my favorite
interactions
pages
with people.
And so far, Charlie, touch wood, the algorithm it's been kind to me, because we know the algorithm chooses absolutely everything that you get to see, but it does seem to keep me up to date with anything you post. So Zuckerberg, I thank you for that, man.
Yeah. Well, when we come back on the other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the social media purge, because surprise, surprise, YouTube took my video down.
Well, I already highlighted to you that the algorithm doesn't like the shows that I do with Charlie. There's something about Charlie. Maybe now that you've covered up the glazed donut look, maybe now we'll be all right, dude. Hour number 2 with my good friend, author Charlie Robinson, the Octopus of Global Control. And we were talking about Charlie's recent trip to the British Isles, in particular London. And the reason Charlie was over in London was because I had a quick word with one of my handlers back home over in Moscow. And I said this guy would be the perfect fit for some kind of work on Russia Today. Before I know it, well, Charlie, you were on Kremlin 1. You got flown over to England. How did it go, man?
Thank you, Comrade Baker. I appreciate that.
No problem, comrade.
Yes, it went well. I did Renegade Inc., which is a show on Russia Today, RT as we know it, with the great Ross Ashcroft. He is the host of the show, but he is the director and writer of a documentary that I think most people should really go check out. It's been viewed on YouTube like 8 million times. It's called Four Horsemen. Brilliant work, just amazing. And he, one of the main characters that he interviewed was John Perkins, who's the author of Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And I am very upfront that John Perkins' book was like a sledgehammer on my brain when I read that in 2007, waking me up to all of the corruption. So Ross and I talked about that on air and off air as well. But you know, it's funny. We were, before we were filming, we were just chatting about how things work in the media. And he asked me if I'd gone on CNN to promote my book. And I said, no, there's no point. You know, there's just no point in doing that, because they would cut my mic halfway through a conversation and, superimpose a tinfoil hat on my head, and then, put Charlie Robinson, author, and maniac, or conspiracy theorist, or something like that.
Yeah, a bit of X-Files music in the background and that,
For sure. And he laughed about that. He says, well, years ago he had worked at the BBC before he was so disgusted with them he left. He said that if he had worked at the BBC and we were doing this interview, he'd have an earpiece in his ear, and a producer telling him, if I went on an answer that was alarming, like basically every conversation you and I have, if I went down that path, the producer would be in his ears telling him, get off that, change the topic, get on to something else. And if he didn't, he'd be pulled up, he'd be asked to go upstairs to a meeting with his boss, and then he'd be sent in front of like a panel for review of everything. So he understood what I was talking about. And I said, well, how are things with RT? I like RT. I think that they're the best news organization out there. You get you get it's virtually unknown here in the United States. It's sort of on your extended cable package up in channel 380 or something.
That's what should make it appealing to anyone. When
Yes,
governments try and ban information and they ban news organizations, then you know that they're scared of something that's contained in there. And I'm like you, I'm a big fan of Russia Today. I like the whole, is it the Bullhorns as well? That's a good show. You get the people sitting there having the crosstalk. That's the one. And so what is the Russian involvement like?
So I asked him, I said, so what's it like here as opposed to BBC? And he said, I have never had one single person tell me what I can and can't say on RT. And I was like, wow, really? And he's like, not a single one. Not obviously, you can't talk about Putin. He says, I've mentioned Putin plenty of times, and not in a good way. I've never gotten that phone call from the network. I've never gotten you got to go upstairs and have that meeting. Nothing. He said, it's just been a delight to work there. And they've been doing that show for 2 years now. I think he's close to over 100 episodes. So yeah, check it out. It'll be on RT on YouTube. It'll be on RT, the channel, in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure exactly. They've got to edit it down. But I love the guy. We really had a great conversation, and I strongly encourage people to check out his documentary, Four Horsemen. You'll like it. It's sort of slanted a little bit more into the financial components of control, but it's not limited to that. But we he's just a guy that you could get on board with, and so I've been a fan of his show for a while. And when my book came out, we started talking a little bit, and he's like, his producer said, well, if you're ever in London, and I thought, wow, when am I going to be in London? Well, I was. I figured I was going to be there, and talked to the producer, and they said, let's have you come out then. Let's make sure we'll set it up. So it was good. I think I think if anyone has listened to me on the Kev Baker Show, then you probably have already heard what I'm going to say there, but still check it out anyway.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the elephant in the living room there, YouTube. Be it this show, be it the Renegade, be it thousands of other channels right now. Things are starting to heat up over on the biggest video sharing platform in the world. And I tell you what, YouTube, it's not feeling much like the U anymore in tubing. It's feeling very much as if it's turning towards the mainstream media tube. What do you think, Charlie?
I think it's more like the F YouTube.
Yeah.
I got an email they took a video of mine down, where an interview that I did with Jim Fetzer talking about Sandy Hook. What a surprise. They took that down. I mean, I knew that was coming. It had been flagged before. This is just, if you think about it, what did they talk about in the adpocalypse purge recently? They said that they were going after people that were hate speech, which I think is probably more defined as speech that they hate, not necessarily hate
brilliant
speech itself.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love it, man.
Holocaust deniers, which, i.e., if you read into that, I don't know too many people that are denying the Holocaust happened. I think that there are some people that are in there that are denying the numbers.
I debate the number. But there's no way.
The numbers as well.
Let me categorically state right now, some bad juju went on down there in those concentration camps. Do not think I deny that. We can split hairs over the numbers. It was genocide, okay? For sure.
Yeah. And they'll say, well, it wasn't 6 million. It was more like 1.5 million. 1.5 million is too many.
Exactly.
Clearly. But Holocaust deniers, the code word for that is anybody critical of the Israeli government. I think that there's that's sort of the code word for that. And then the third component, and they mentioned specifically Sandy Hook, or they said anybody that challenges established, don't remember exactly how they said,
authoritative sources
of mass shootings that were sort of, established. So what they're saying is, if you're questioning Sandy Hook, then we're going to ban you, right? We're going to demonetize your videos. We're going to kick your channel off. We're going to deperson you, right? If you're mentioning that. So my question is, why? Why so sensitive about that? If it happened the way it happened, what do you care if people are questioning it? If it's so obvious that it happened the way it happened, then anyone questioning it would look foolish just on their face. So unless there's more to it that they don't want you to figure out. So whenever somebody tells you that you can't do this or you can't do that, as kids, what do we want to do? You want to do that exact same thing. You want to go see what it is. Oh, you're not allowed to drink. Can't drink till you're 21. Can't smoke till you're 18. Well, I want to do those things now. I want to see what the fuss is all about. Well, if it has to do with questioning these events or something like Sandy Hook, what's the harm in having this discussion? If I want to put up a video that says that I think that there's issues with it, why shouldn't I be allowed to? I mean, shouldn't I just be ridiculed? Shouldn't that be my punishment enough? Like, if you're taking it down and preventing that conversation from happening, my feeling is then there's definitely needs to be a conversation happening.
And there's
because
a
if you're
freedom
trying
of
to
choice
silence
as well.
me from
There's
it,
a freedom of choice, you know. You don't have to watch things. Nobody's sitting there prying your eyes open, making you watch something that you know is going to offend you. So, yeah, and something else, it's not even censorship as we know it, because this is censorship by algorithm. It's purely digital, it's clinical, and Scott Lopez, he brought up a good point on Facebook again the other day about how basically, you know, here they are now, they're banning and they're taking down videos that legitimately catalogue World War II history, the Nazis, things like that. And how ironic, because wasn't it the Nazis themselves that were the ones doing book burnings and things like that?
Yeah.
So the thing is, though, whether you're debunking something or whether you're pushing a narrative or a conspiracy theory, these algorithms are indiscriminate. They just hear that word and it's a blanket. It's like a big hammer, as Joe says. They take a hammer to every problem and can't discern between somebody that's being factual and trying to be honest about a topic from somebody that's trying to spin a yarn, maybe just putting out falsely by mistake information, or the worst end of it, scamming, trying to make money from lies, you know. We're all getting banned.
Well, what's funny is that another component of that was brought up. It wasn't in this last purge, but it was in the purge before. How crazy is it that we have to sort of clarify which purge we're talking about? It's
crazy. Adpocalypse 1 and everything else. Now we've got the Vox Adpocalypse.
Well, I prefer Adpocalypse 2 Electric Boogaloo. That's my favorite so far. But if you remember one of the last ones, it was flat Earth videos. So my thinking was, this is the greatest advertisement ever for flat Earthers, because they can go, listen, they're trying to ban our videos. Like, if that doesn't tell you we're onto something, I don't know what is. Now, I'm not a flat earther, and I know you're not either, but it was funny to me that they lumped that in there, because I don't know if they did it to sort of like try and drag everybody down to the flat earth level and sort of just humiliate people or sort of discredit them by like, look at you, you're no better than people talking about the flat earth. Or if they're legitimately fearful that people are going to believe that the earth is flat. If that turned out to be true, it would be the greatest lie of all time. But
I think it's almost like a bait and switch from the old pejorative of conspiracy theorist that was kind of waning.
Right.
It was kind of dying out. And folks, this isn't an insult on anyone who follows flat earth. I'm talking about it from the way they're using it. They're now using it to make all conspiracy theories. And people who aren't into flat earth, unfortunately, for people who are into it, again, no offense, but they find it ridiculous. So if they put flat earth videos on a banned list and everything else that goes on that banned list, then it makes everyone look like that flat earther, that conspiracy theorist. So I think that's one of the tactics. And, you know, I hadn't thought about why maybe flat earth was in there, but I think that probably might have something to do with it, you know?
I think it's probably just to sort of try to discredit and humiliate. But what if it was because they're like secretly worried that, like, oh my God, they're getting too close to the truth?
Maybe they fear that one day me and you are going to find the ice wall, Charlie.
Right. Well, I've joked that the number one reason why I've even watched any of the flat Earth videos is because, and this is the least scientific reason for of all time, but because the UN's flag is that flat Earth that's divided into 33 sections. And I look at that and I go, these bastards are just evil and sneaky enough to put it in plain sight. You know what I mean? Like, you know how they love symbolism, and you know how they love putting things in plain sight. Like, how crazy would they, you know, how much would they be getting a good laugh out of this if the UN's flag, which is like a top-down version, the weirdest version of the globe you would ever think to put on a flag, that sort of flat Earth version divided into 33 sections, you know?
Exactly. Don't get me wrong.
It always made me laugh. I'm not
was,
trying to say that there's flat Earth, but I'm just saying that that one part
flat.
made me.
I wish it was flat for one reason. Then we could line up these elites that are in your book and the ones doing all this.
March them right off the edge.
Thank you very much. Like lemons, elite little lemons, right off the edge. We're out of here. We can get back to having some kind of humane world where we can all get along again, right?
Well, my mom has said that she knows that the Earth is not flat, because if it was flat, then the cats would have knocked everything off of it by now.
That sounds about right, dude. It really, really does. But where do you see this censorship going then? Because,
well, yeah, I see this ending badly for everybody. I see this, like you said, it's an algorithm, right? So they've got the AI and they're looking for keywords, but who told them to look for keywords? Where's that coming from? Is that coming from Google itself? Is that coming from somebody above them? We've talked about this before. It's coming from the Atlantic Council. It's coming from these think tanks, these groups. And you look at the Atlantic Council and who finances them. They're financed by big oil, pharmaceutical companies, and the military industrial complex as well. I mean, that's where they get the funding from. So you get all these people together and at the Atlantic Council with different sort of agendas, but they kind of meet in when they get Facebook, Twitter, and Alphabet in front of them, and they say, listen, the things we're concerned about is we don't want people talking about anti-vaccines, because we're in the vaccine business. So ban those people. We don't want people talking about anti-war, because we're in the war business. So get rid of those people. We don't want people talking about having anything to say about Israel, because of course Israel is a huge financial component of this. They fund tons of these organizations and startups as well. You know, and then you've got and then oil, of course, the big oil companies are in their sort of in line with the military industrial complex too, because they're okay with wars, because wars jack up the prices of oil and it allows them to overthrow certain countries, i.e. Venezuela, to go in there and get the oil. And so what they're doing is they're saying, in order for our industries to be more profitable, or to retain our hold on things, meaning big oil, big pharma, and the military industrial complex, we got to make sure that we don't have a bunch of loose cannons on these social media sites talking about the types of things that might wake up everybody to the game that's being played, which is we're running the show in reality. So what we need you guys to do is we need you to silence them. Make up whatever reason you want, but shut these people up. And that's what's been happening. And you know, Charlie, it's coming from. They're not trying to disguise it. Atlantic Council has talked about this. Facebook and Alphabet and Twitter have talked about their involvement with them. So this isn't some. It's not in my imagination that this is happening. This is really what's happening. This is how it's happening.
Absolutely. And you know, people might think, well, why on earth's name did they ever give us the right to go uploading these videos and sharing information in the first place if this was the plan all along? Well, they needed us to get hooked on it. They needed to sucker us all into it. And again, we go back to Ike. You know, he explains this brilliantly. You know, they had to get us to a point where the internet is kind of central in our lives, because all of the data will now be used to control us. And the fun's over. You know, that Wild West approach, that's rapidly coming to an end now. And we're seeing the real face of the internet. Again, Charlie, know the outcome and you see the journey, right?
Yep. The internet giveth and the internet taketh away.
Yep.
You know, and we have all these amazing things that have come because of that. And I think that maybe on some levels they didn't anticipate that the genie would get out of the bottle in this way. Maybe they did. Maybe some of the high level thinkers mapped this all out and saw it crystal clear. But I think that probably like most things, they had a general idea of how it would go. They also, because they understand what their goals are, they saw the internet as a tool for taking their goals to the next level. What it did also is it also sort of had the unintended consequence of connecting people together and allowing them to share information that they did not want shared. What they would prefer is that the internet stay intact and people share information, but only share the information that they want shared. And that is where we're going right now. So I don't see the internet going anywhere, but I do see the role of, I think it's fair to say that Google is turning into like another corporate news entity, right? It's just a consolidation of several news organizations, but it used to be that when you would type up, if you went and typed up, Boston bombing, you would get interviews you'd get Jim Fetzer interviews, or you'd get this or that. You'd get articles from, anti-media, or you'd get a variety of articles, and maybe one from CNN or Fox News or whatever. Now, when you do it, all you get is the mainstream media. All you get is CNN and all those. And the reason is because these major corporate media conglomerates are getting destroyed financially by the alternative media. Not just financially destroyed, but their reputation is being destroyed as well. I mean, you're having, everybody that is paying attention now knows that the Washington Post is garbage, right? It's garbage. It's owned by Bezos. It's filled with, it might as well just be the CIA Post.
Come
because
on,
that's
Charlie,
all it is.
give it its right title, the Washington Compost.
Washington Compost, exactly. So
Absolutely.
we're seeing all these things, and the big corporate media heads. Your CNN is laying off people. Get ready, Vox. You guys are next. You guys are done. You're seeing NBC take a write down for their purchase of Vice, or for their $400 million investment in Vice. They've written that off from an accounting standpoint as being next to worthless. I don't think that Vice is worthless. I think they're totally compromised, but I don't think they're worthless. But from an accounting standpoint, these things, these components that make up the corporate media have no value anymore. And part of the reason why they have no value is because, they've been exposed as being government shills. They've been reading CIA talking points. They've been chasing Russiagate for 2.5 years and humiliated themselves, while the alternative media is standing on the side going, you guys are idiots. There's nothing there. We're telling you there's nothing there. And then CNN and MSNBC come out and say, well, there's nothing there now, but there's something there, but we just can't tell you about it. And
Absolutely.
You're like,
you mentioned Vice there, right?
Yeah.
Again, synchronicity. Last night I was trying the shock factor on Joe and Scott Lopez, showing them how haggis is made. I won't go into it, right? But I was showing a video. It's from a company called Munchies. Never heard of it before. I thought to myself, this will be safe enough. And don't get me wrong, before I say this, I do realise that legally I had violated copyright, okay? So I come off the stream, and at most, I'll maybe get 2,000 or 3,000 views, maybe about $5, $10 off that. Yet Vice came in within seconds of it going live and took the monetization from that video because of that 3-minute clip of theirs that I used. Wasn't even like abusing them, the company, and they're spending millions and millions of pounds a year to make content. And I get it, they've got the copyright to it. But here they are, that desperate that they copyright strike and take that few $5-10 away from me, just in case, I kind of damage their bottom line. It's ridiculous, dude. So I
like Shane Smith, but that company has they're going to need it. They're going to need the $5 or $10.
You were talking about Google as well, and it's you're right, because if you can control what people are saying, you then control what people are thinking. And by that, you're controlling what people are perceiving, and that shifts behavior, it shifts opinion. Yeah. Before too long, we all start thinking the same way. We're going to be like little drones. And then Google, again, I'm going to bring this up on screen. If you watch this on YouTube, if this segment even makes it into YouTube, I doubt it. But Google here, get a load of this. This comes from 24th of March. Megamind. Google brain implants could mean the end of school, as anyone would be able to learn anything instantly. And the expert believes that within 20 years, our heads will be boosted with special implants so you won't need to memorize anything.
Wow. Let me guess. Ray Kurzweil's involved in that.
Oh, absolutely. You know that's one of his futurist wet
Yeah.
dreams, dude.
I'm not one that says let's not embrace progress, right? And we've got this amazing computer technology, and where is it going to go? And isn't it great to learn all these things? And the idea of having all that information at the, available to you is appealing, and it could be helpful. I certainly would rather have more information available to me than less information, but the quality of the information is what matters, right? If you've got Google in charge of who, is that Eric Schmidt quote when he talks about, when you go to Google, how many search results do you get? We get thousands. Well, that's a bug, right? You should type in the question and only get one answer. Well, that sounds good. If you're talking about who won, last night's football game, yeah. Right? But that doesn't sound good when the question is what happened on 9/11. And when Google wants to control that. So to have the idea of this technology that allows you to instantly have all this information in your head, I mean, first of all, what could possibly go wrong there? But secondly, like, what if who's in charge of the information that's getting beamed into your head, right? That information, I mean, they just turn you into a Manchurian candidate, right? Couldn't they just, I mean, what's to stop them from not just giving you, yesterday's football scores to giving you instructions on where to go shoot the president?
I could not agree with you more. And they've already got voice to skull technology, they call it. So they're already in our heads, dude. We know that.
Oh, I've got that too, but that's just my wife.
I won't say anything. Anne's sitting far too close to me right now. I am I'm within shoe distance, and we know the shoe is the weapon of choice for Anne,
I know, you look like George W. Bush.
That's how I feel. I tell you, dude, you don't know what the half of it looks like. I've got it all down here, very professional show. 22 hours a day, I'm avoiding abuse in shoes, dude. It's terrible, man. Right. Honestly.
Yeah. Well, I told you what happened with my book when it finally came. I hadn't told my wife I wrote it. She opened the box, the big box that came from the publisher, thinking it was going to be something else, and found stacks of this book with my face on the back, and she threw me out of the house for 2 days.
But isn't that a synchronicity as well, right? Because you hid the fact you were writing the book, and the man that inspired your book done exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I find out from Ross Ashcroft that when he was from talking to John Perkins, that John Perkins wrote his book the same way and told him, oh, you've always got to do that. You got to keep it totally under wraps. Can't tell anyone about it. And so he said, did you get that from John Perkins? I said, no, I had no idea that he did that. So apparently we had the same strategy. Maybe his wife didn't appreciate him writing a book exposing the criminal elements within his government as well.
She probably appreciated just what heat and attention that would bring on them, as would your wife have appreciated it as well. We'll be back.
Well, if it sold 5 million copies, she would.
Well, that would be nice, right? We'll be back on the other side. Don't go anywhere, folks. Can you believe it, ladies and gentlemen? Final segment of today's show right here on Truth Frequency Radio, TFRlive.com, with myself and Charlie Robinson, the author of The Octopus of Global Control. The last segment, probably exclusive to TFR, because I can't see that beating the algorithm over on YouTube. So thank you all for being here today on the home of the Kev Baker Show. And of course, the Kev Baker Show is only as good as the guests that I can bring on here. And Charlie Robinson is somebody I can't speak highly enough of, as is Ryan Gable, my good friend from the secretteachings.info. Remember to check out his show over on Fringe FM. Yes, I remembered that there. And of course, we were talking during the break, Charlie, about Contact in the Desert. Don't worry, folks, not one blue feather in sight here, because Charlie, you actually grew up where Contact in the Desert is, right?
I did. I grew up in Palm Desert, California, and one city over from Indian Wells where it was taking place. So I was happy to see. It's in the name, right? Contact in the Desert. It doesn't get to be much more of a desert than there.
I must admit,
for those that don't know the area itself, it's Palm Springs, which a lot of people remember or know of. That's where the movie stars from the 50s and 60s all had houses there. Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley. I almost said Elvis Costello. Frank Sinatra. They all have houses there. And then as you go out, it sort of expanded Palm Desert, and now in the Indian Wells is a very small town where they have where they had the event there, and the next town over is La Quinta, and then if you go past that, that's where Coachella is, where they have the yearly festival. And I grew up out there, then moved there, lived there again from 2011 to 2014. In my backyard during Coachella, if I went out in my backyard, I could hear the music. It was that close. So
wow, and of course, Contact in the Desert.
I was able to. No, go ahead.
Oh, we had a bit of a lag there. Contact in the Desert. I mean, it's not exactly probably the kind of conference that you might get invited to. It's not really that kind of information. However, you do go to conferences and things, and Contact's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. And I must admit, I would like to go to a Contact. There's so many good speakers that talk there about subjects that I'm really, really interested in. And somebody who was talking there, I believe, was Graham Hancock, right?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't get invited there to necessarily to speak about my book, although I would go if I was invited. But I would go to that conference just to listen to all of the speakers. But I would do in advance. I would have to get my blue chickenpox vaccine.
And of course, I'm going to reconnect you, Charlie. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reconnect you quickly. I don't know what's happening there. It's a bit weird, but we'll reconnect Charlie. Just 2 seconds, folks. Obviously, the adpocalypse, the algorithm must have heard us talking about that. It's kicked in. I'm only joking, folks. I'm not one of these people that get paranoid that, the deep state or anything's listening to my show. I wish they were. Maybe the deep state would learn a thing or two listening to myself and Charlie. And he's back. He's looking unpixelated. He's sounding unpixelated, I hope. Yeah, Contact in the Desert, Charlie. Good. And, of course, Ryan was there. And without going into that blue chicken madness, I mean, I think both me and you were absolutely blown away with his professionalism throughout all of this and the work that he done there, right?
Oh, he's the best. He really is. And I like somebody like Ryan that gets in there and asks the difficult question. I mean, because let's face it, that's an area where people have a lot of questions, just in general, right? Just under the topic of UFOs. When you introduce the whole blue chicken thing into it, there better be questions. And if somebody is trying to stifle that, if someone is trying to prevent Ryan from asking what I perceived to be a pretty basic question, right? Then you have to question why they didn't want him to talk. Why you don't want to ask these questions if they're so dangerous. Like, look, if this whole blue chicken thing is so real and so, and it happens and these guys have the information on it, I would be welcoming any question, every question, even if I'd answered it a million times. And like, for them to try and shut him down, to me, is an indication that they're totally full of crap. I mean, I think we've talked about that in the past, and I'm not one that is anti-UFO. I believe that there are mysteries that we do not have the answers to. I believe in all kinds of things like that. I am open to it for sure. I'm not open to Corey Good. That guy's totally a con artist. I think it's quite obvious, and we've talked about this before, but I'll say it again, where I compare him to Gary McKinnon, who talked about logging into the NASA servers and pulling down the list of non-terrestrial officers of the, USS Roscoe Hillenkoper and all these, all
that good stuff,
fleet to fleet transfers, and talking about all this stuff, and people were interested, rightfully so, in that story. But that story remained that story, and it didn't expand, right? He didn't bring in anything else. He got to the point where he had told the story and there was nothing left to sell.
And he was getting threatened with 70 years in a chain gang over
right,
it,
Right, exactly. That's also kind of a key indicator when they're threatening to throw you in prison for talking about all that stuff. That's probably a good hint that you are on the right track to some real information. Corey Good and Corey's kids and those blue chicken morons, the story always gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And, oh, I forgot about this. And, oh, and then one time this. And like, there's a point at which you've told the story and there's nothing left to tell. Corey hasn't gotten to that part. The fact that they're trying to merchandise everything, they're trying to I understand. Look, I'm selling a book too. I'm not going to fault the guy for people for writing a book, trying to sell it and everything.
But you're not like telling Corey's people. You're not telling people you're some kind of outer space liaison officer talking to these entities that have all of our best interests at heart, and we can just go back to sleep, buy his T-shirts, and the cabal will get locked up tomorrow. You're not doing that, dude. Right.
No, I'm not. I'm telling people to wake up and do their own research, and it's not okay. And don't go back to sleep, and don't wait for someone to come and save you. You got to save yourself. We have to rise up as a group and save ourselves and take our planet back, take our countries back, our families, our way of life back. Whenever someone is telling you to trust the plan, whether it's Q or Blue Chickens, to just sit back and trust the plan, that should be a red flag to most people. That is, these people are telling me to do nothing. Therefore, that's going to be a problem because the government also wants you to do nothing. And so it makes me think that they are tied together. And, Ryan goes over, asks the simple question, gets shut down. To me, that's even more of an indication that they have something to hide. If you can't answer a simple question from a guy like Ryan, who's totally reasonable, logical, polite, and a decent human being with a track record of being a journalist, and you call him out for asking these questions, I'm sorry, that's what journalists do. They ask the question. They don't even have to ask tough questions. Just ask some questions. So he was going there to talk about this and to say, I have some questions about this story, and then to have all of Jordan Sather's people turn on him and start saying, "How dare you talk? You get out of here and take that girl with you. Is this your first time here? Yeah, it's my first year. Get out of here. Don't ever come back." That's what you say when you're lying, right? That's what you say when you have something to hide. That's not the response you get from somebody that you remember. You want to talk about every topic that can get us deplatformed, but you remember the Las Vegas thing when Laura Loomer went into that press conference and said to Sheriff Joe Lombardo, "I have evidence that you checked in from a valet parking ticket 3 days earlier than what your official timeline is. I have evidence of this." What was his response? Get out.
Yeah.
His response wasn't, "Come talk to me afterwards. I'm very interested in what you have. That's what you would do if you were running an actual investigation. You wouldn't tell someone like that to get out. He later then had to change the timeline to match hers because she, in fact, did have evidence showing that he had checked in 3 days earlier. So it exposed Sheriff Lombardo as being a compulsive liar, which of course he is. So with Jordan Sather and his crew, when you get a Ryan Gable playing the role of Laura Loomer in this situation and coming up and asking a question, if you're being 100% honest and your story is true, you would encourage someone like that. You would be like, "Yeah, let's talk about it. Let me explain it to you in a way that will help you understand better." That's not what they did. They said, "Get out." How you would act if you were lying.
No.
And they're lying.
Absolutely, dude. Absolutely. And we're on the same frequency. We're definitely brothers from another mother because there's very little distance between the Blue Chickens and the barbecue sauce that goes all over the top of them. So that aside, moving away from that to the fact that we are both passionate about ufology, we love a good mystery. We're also two people that have a healthy distrust and skepticism when it comes to anything that government tells us. So how are we meant to react, Charlie, to all of this Pentagon stuff coming out, the new show on History Channel, Unidentified, all of these DOD, ex-Pentagon characters coming out? I mean, confirmation is bias is something we've been discussing a lot recent times, and it'd be easy for me to get really excited right now. See the light at the end of this UFO tunnel. We're getting there, dude. We're going to get all the documents, that disclosure, that term that we all like to bandy about. But is that the case, Charlie? What do you think, man?
Well, it's funny because we're all, for the last 20 years, we're all sort of on the sideline going, disclose it, let's get some evidence. We need whistleblowers to come forward. We want to talk about this. We know it's happening. And then all of a sudden, then these Pentagon guys come out and start saying, yeah, well, this is kind of happening. And we instantly, my response was, this is not how I want disclosure. These are not the people I trust. These people are full of it. So I was like, I want disclosure. I want the truth, but I don't want it from them because I don't trust them. I don't trust Elizondo. I don't trust Tom DeLonge. Shouldn't say I don't trust Tom DeLonge. I just think he's getting played by these guys. It's coming out in a way that makes me think that there's a much bigger agenda. It makes me think that there's more of that Werner von Braun agenda, right? This is the setup. Like what we've been doing over the years, we're starting to get much better, you and I and a lot of the fans, at recognizing a setup when we see it, recognizing that they're laying the groundwork for a future lie.
Go back to it again, Charlie. We'll keep going back to it. Know the outcome. You see the journey, and you can see the little pit stops along the way. And we know this coming together on a global level, something that's been on the cards for a while. And I know people might roll their eyes at this, but you need a global crisis, some kind of global threat, an outside threat. You know, how we would all forget our differences, Charlie.
Yeah, as Reagan said. Yeah. And so you hear that. I mean, there's the typical response to that is, yeah, you're right. Ronald Reagan was right. It is true. If we all, wouldn't our differences disappear if we were faced with a global threat? For sure they would. But then I think about the Werner von Braun disclosure to Carol Rosen, talking about how it will come in the form of a fake alien invasion. And then I think, well, maybe Reagan was laying the groundwork for that, right? Because it wasn't the first time he said it. I think he'd said it twice.
Yeah.
Then it's like, well, I guess if they were sort of laying the groundwork for a global fake alien invasion, this is how you'd go about it, right? You'd sort of slowly leak it out. Some Pentagon people.
And think of the media as well,
CIA
Charlie.
got disgruntled.
The media for years, I've had the tactic that we were laughing and joking about when you were on Russia Today. They'd play the X-Files music, they'd have wee green men in the background, and they can't go from that attitude, that approach to tackling these types of stories, to one day trying to seriously convince billions of people when they're covering an alien threat that's just on the horizon or just over the horizon out in space. They need to have this almost the tiptoe to get there, right?
Yeah, and you've got people. So also, let's judge the message by the messenger, right? So who was talking about aliens on Jimmy Kimmel? Hillary Clinton. Who's less trustworthy than Hillary Clinton? Maybe John Podesta? John Podesta was in charge of it too.
You mean her disclosure guy?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, hey, great, let's get disclosure, but not coming from John Podesta. And I don't want Hillary Clinton talking about it because those two people are not trustworthy. And if they're involved, then it's a scam. It's a con. They're trying to steal money or do something nefarious there. So like, I don't know who exactly the information would need to come from that I would trust. Maybe Graham Hancock, right? If Graham Hancock discovered something in one of his digs, I know he's not an archaeologist, but you know what I mean. If he discovered something that showed that, I would be more inclined to believe him because I have a level of trust for his work, and I know that he's taken a beating over 20 years by going up against the establishment by proposing different theories that don't fit with the established view of history and archaeology, and he's battled through it and had people finally say, okay, I guess you were right about this. And that his new book, America Before, he talks about the same thing, that they discovered that there were inhabitants in North America, 100,000 years before Clovis man. And that was heresy to say that, and he took a beating for that. And some of the other people have taken a beating for that, only to be proven right. So if someone like Graham Hancock was the disclosure guy, I'd be more inclined to believe it, and I'd be willing to sort of trust that. When it comes from Elizondo, an ex-spook, and Tom DeLonge, the guitarist for Blink-182, and Hillary Clinton and John Podesta, I'm sorry, you're going to have to get better representatives than that, because those guys are all full of it.
You've got Hal Puthoff as well,
Hal Puthoff has been compromised as well, because there used to be a time back when he was doing his remote viewing work when he was thought to be somebody, maybe to be believed. But he's also coming out of SRI, which is Stanford Research Institute, which is known to be a globalist think tank organization that is up to no good. So I also have to worry about that as well. So yeah, it's not only the message, it's the messengers, and they've got the crappiest messengers you could possibly find. Corey Good, Jordan Sather, Luis Elizondo, Tom DeLonge, Hillary Clinton, John Podesta. I mean, was Boris Johnson not available? Like, what's going on here?
Bonkers Boris.
Bonkers Boris coming down with his flags.
He's going to be the next leader of this country. You do know that, right?
Good luck with him.
Again, totally selected, merely there to do a job, the face of the agenda. And he's kind of as polarizing as your man Donald Trump. Absolutely.
And they're friends. What a surprise, right? They like each other.
I have to take just 2 seconds time out, Charlie. I shared a photo with you in the chat room there on Skype. This comes from the chat room at TFR, and they've got myself and my beloved Alessandra, Cortez on the back of Nessie. King Sweet, I absolutely adore you, man. And of course, people can get to the chat room over at tfrlive.com/chat. Now, you were talking about respectable sources, people that we can put some degree of trust in. And when it comes to ufology, I think one of those characters would be Richard Dolan. He's been doing this for years. And just over the weekend, if people didn't see this, there was a release of a document. It was relating to a meeting that happened a good few years ago. It's been rumoured that this information has been out there. However, this is the document now coming out. And, really condensed. I don't want to spoil the information. I urge anyone to check out on Richard Dolan's channel. But basically, this is almost, and we can only take it at face value, Charlie, right? It's a document.
Right.
But it's talking about reverse engineering, not for Soviet or Chinese technology, and not for technology that man has made. It doesn't talk about any entities or anything like that. But it's almost, I find the timing interesting as well, okay? And this is nothing against Richard Dolan, but this is coming out at the same time as we're getting all of this programming coming from the media as well. So again, I have to kind of put my confirmation bias on check. I need to step back and look at it. It's an interesting data point, and anybody interested in ufology, please, please, please go and check that out. But I would give me, give me one Richard Dolan to 1 million Elizondos.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. I like Richard Dolan, and I like his work. I think he's been very measured. Yes. I know, I think he believes in the alien things, but you find him, being diplomatic about, trying to be very careful about what he says, because I think he understands, your credibility in this line of work is everything, and it doesn't take much. You chase the wrong rabbit down the wrong rabbit hole, and you're tarred with that whole thing. And you like the blue avians, all this stuff. You want to believe, right? You want to believe that we found this information, but it can't, So like you said, I take one Richard Dolan over 1 million Elizondos and Sathers and guys like that.
Well, Bam in the chat room, he agrees. And, just kind of switching topics slightly, but we're talking about trusted sources and things like that. I've dropped a message in your chat room in the Skype again, Charlie. And this comes from Alan Holman out there in the TFR chat room. Thanks for the information, brother. And there's a synchronicity to this as well. This was in my backup introduction tonight. We've got the Renegade thing going on. Charlie's just appeared on a RT show called Renegade. We're both very, very big fans of David Icke, obviously, and his movie, Renegade, is out right now, or should be out right now, but by the looks of it, not so much in Canada. Alan says this: David Icke's new documentary, Renegade, still isn't available in Canada. The Amazon link on his site doesn't accept Canadian addresses for purchasing the film. I owe David Icke money because I found an alternative way to watch the film, and I loved it. And Alan, I can't speak for David Icke, but I'm sure David Icke would just be happy that you've got to see the information, despite this censorship. And Charlie, you were firsthand to this. I mean, you kind of came back from a conference. David went to LA, and he wasn't allowed to have a viewing there, right?
Well, he wasn't allowed to go to Australia, and so I wouldn't be surprised if he was having the same sort of issues with trying to watch it, through an Australian address as well. But what does that say? Once again, when they're trying to silence the messenger like this, what does it say? And this isn't even really a message so much as it is just a documentary about his life, which, by the way, I have to watch. I'll watch this week for sure, now that I'm back. But that just kind of gives it even more credit too, right? If they want to block it, if they're blocking it in Canada, well, then what is he saying that's so important? If the whole country won't let you watch it, then they've banned drugs. Good thing nobody's ever done drugs, right? Everyone finds a way to get around it. The fact that they think that they're going to suppress this information by banning it is ludicrous. This is what they did to Graham Hancock on in his TED Talk, The War on Consciousness. They banned it, and what did they do? They wound up having it go underground, and it got 10 million views because of that. Because everyone wants to know what TED Talk videoed, put up, then banned. Right. So if the information is so important that it needs to be banned, then I want to see it.
It's
right.
I want to watch effect. Yeah, I think was it Barbara Streisand?
Streisand.
Yeah, she was
Streisand effect. Exactly, yeah.
She kind of she wanted the image of her. Was it her house or something taken off the net?
Yeah.
Nobody was interested in it. Nobody was even interested in her or it. And then, like you say, because you're told not to, mega virality.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the last thing they should do.
And we'll go back quickly to the secret space from the chat room before we go, Charlie. Epic, all the way from Hawaii. Brilliant comment here. All of the original SSP, and, thanks to characters like Corey Good, that's actually a trademark term now, SSP. Go figure. Secret Space Program conference over in Amsterdam seemed legitimate, and he names characters Dolan, Peter Lavender, the late, great Jim Mars, and Fitz Springmeier. I take it that is before the invasion of the blue chicken people, and they invaded and they hijacked it, basically.
Yeah, and it's a shame. But then again, that's what you would do if you think about this like the way the government would think about it. If they see a conference like that doing well, maybe getting a little close to the truth, then let's discredit it. So what do? They inject a bit of nonsense and then submarine the whole thing. Paint them with a whole blue brush.
Any movement, Occupy, anything that starts to gain a bit of traction, they infiltrate it, they hijack it, and they bring it down. And just going off what Epic said there, it really was, people getting interested, some really good research. Jim Mars, of all people as well, talking about this. So it starts to bring people in. People are starting to flock to it. They're starting to see this. What's the best way? It's the same tactic. You infiltrate it and you bring it down.
Yeah, there's a formula for it.
Yeah.
Once things start to get a little bit too popular or a little bit too close to the truth, they then bring somebody in, an agent provocateur, like they did in Occupy, and next thing you know, there's rapes. Oh, well, we got to send in the police to shut them down.
They've done that over here in Glasgow as well, Charlie, by the way. Not so well known, but we had a kind of a small camp in the city centre, and that's exactly how they closed it down. Somebody accused of a rape that just never, ever even went to court, never happened. And before you know it, nobody was going near the place. Poisoned.
Well, that's what they do. And they don't have to get too creative with the strategy because it works all the time. They're going to run that play until it stops working anymore. Yep. We see it coming. We know it's coming. You talk about Chris Hedges, who's an author who has his own show on RT, but he was there in Zuccotti Park. He was getting arrested and everything, and he was telling these people, this is what's coming. This is how it works. This is what they're going to start to corrupt the crowd.
And Charlie has been interfered with again. And I say that in the cleanest possible sense. Oh, you're back? No, he's not back. You know what I'll do? I'll cut Charlie off just now because he's going to come back maybe 2 minutes late or something. I'll call him in a minute. But we're almost out of time, folks. Charlie Robinson, the author of the Octopus of Global Control. So I hope you've enjoyed today's show. I certainly have. Remember to check out the octopusofglobalcontrol.com. Lucky coming up after the break with Dr. Brooks Agnew. So don't go anywhere. It's been great being back today. I think it'll just be myself tomorrow, Joe in hour 2, and we'll see what's happening in the rest of the week. To be confirmed, as they say. But for another night, wherever you are, make it TFR and Dinny touch that dial.